All right, fired up to be part of this Arizona coaches roundtable today, and we've got two great ones. I am not one of them, but I did play at the University of Arizona. My name's Matt Muehlebach. Played from 1987 to 91, and was fortunate enough to be on some great teams. One of which was the 1987-88 Final Four team. And it's a good segue to one of my good buddies, Steve Kerr, who was on the team. Steve was a senior and now, of course, the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. And Stevie, I know it's been written a lot, 5 titles as a player and 3 as a coach, and we'll get to that in a minute. And then also on this Zoom call, we've got Sean Miller, the current coach for the University of Arizona. And so 2 unbelievable coaches. I played against Sean actually in McHale Center. Gosh, Sean, that was 1988 or 89 in the Christmas tournament. So it goes back a ways, but I thought maybe
that game didn't go real well for the
current coach
of Arizona. Yeah.
Wait. So I didn't know that. I remember though, Matt, you guys going to Pittsburgh and losing big. Now, but Sean, were you gone by that time?
So I tell you what, you bring that up, Steve. We've had many conversations about that. I actually was injured, so I was redshirting that year, but I was at the game. And, you know, me being a guy growing up in Pittsburgh, at that time we were in the Big East, and, you know, I think that would be about February. I mean, let's put it at 15 degrees. The sun hadn't come out in 8 weeks, you know, maybe 10 degrees. Who knows what it was, snowing, but I didn't know then what I know now, and that is I think it was like a 12 noon tip, wasn't it, Matt? I mean, so you think about Arizona leaving this crazy, beautiful weather, blue sky, sunshine, the long flight, and a 3-hour time change. Clearly, it didn't favor you guys on that day. But, you know, like you only know what you don't know or you do. And if you're someone at that day and age, like that didn't mean anything to us. We didn't look at that as being a disadvantage at all for you guys, you know?
Yeah, I remember we actually got in about midnight the night before the game. It was I think it was an 11 a.m. tip East Coast time, so 8 a.m. for us.
Yeah.
Lute Olson had us, and Steve will remember this, had us do a brisk walk at about 7:30 in the 15 degree, if it was even that warm. And of course, all we had on were sweats. So it was we were ready to get ambushed. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, Damon Stoudemire, when he was with us for the 2 years, he would always talk about the importance of getting outside in an early morning game and walking. That was, I think, one of Coach Olson's go-tos.
That was.
You know, Coach was known for that phrase. That he used to talk about a brisk walk. It had to be a brisk walk. So you couldn't be lazy and kind of like bring up the rear. And Coach was out front.
Yeah.
I mean, he was moving too. So we still, to this day, make fun of Coach for the brisk walk. We talk about it all the time.
You know, Steve, let me just hit on that just to start this. You know, you and I and actually Bruce Frazier had a chance to go see Coach O just a couple months ago, or to use one of his phrases, 3 months ago. And I thought it was great to see him. And I think everybody sort of wonders for you as a coach now in the NBA, you know, what are the 1 or 2 things that you took away from Lute now that you're a coach in the NBA that you implement with your teams?
Wow. Well, there's definitely more than 1 or 2. You know, I find myself still doing some of the ball handling drills that we did, you know, when we were playing for Coach Olson. He was the first coach I ever had who used the toss back. And we would do the drills, the 3-man passing drills with the toss back. Right. One of the first things I did when I went to Golden State to coach was I ordered 6 toss backs, and so we actually used them with the Warriors, and that was influenced by Coach O. But I think it's for me, it's more in general. It's not that so much the detail of like what drills I took. It's just the general sense that I learned from Coach and that we all did of just being incredibly organized and prepared and running this program that just felt like something special, and that's what was so magical about Coach Olson. I mean, he was in total command of that program, and we all just felt so lucky to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, Sean, you've been like Steve, had a lot of good coaches in your career. I'm wondering for you, your dad is a legendary coach, and I'm always curious, is it your dad that you probably learned the most from, or is it some of the other guys? I know Thad Matta, a big part of your coaching lineage. Who are some of the guys that you took from and that you implement like Coach did with Steve?
Yeah, no, that was one of the questions, Matt, I love to ask Steve, just because I mean, not only Coach Olson, but imagine combining, a lot of the things from Phil Jackson, Popovich. I mean, Steve has been around really some iconic, amazing coaches that are all, what's so unique is they're all different from each other. And I'm sure he would easily be able to say yes, but there's also a few similarities as well, But to answer your question about me, it's my dad. My dad gave my family passion and a love for the sport. I mean, that's really what it was. I mean, he had a way of making you feel guilty on a hot summer day. Why aren't you out playing pickup on outdoor court, chain net, shirt skins? All you got to do is walk like a mile and a half, and there's a pickup game. Like, why are you here? And yet he'd also be the same guy. If eventually we had a basket in our backyard, back to the weather, it's like, hey, it's snowing. You got to shovel it off. That's what the great ones do. You want to play on television. You want to play college basketball. And like, he gave you kind of a drive in a way that you didn't understand then, but you really do now, that you really have to love what you do. And especially in sports, because the winning and the losing is a completely different dynamic. And unless you really love it, you can really get caught up in the results so much easier. That's really what he gave us. And kind of like Steve, really saying it in a different way. My dad was a huge fundamental guy. Dribble, pass, shoot. You have to be skilled. This is a skilled game. And, it's one sport where all you need is a basketball and yourself. You don't even need a basket. You need a driveway, a road, a parking lot, and, to be able to dribble with both your left and right hand. I think that emphasis on fundamentals and skill and the passion, that's really what I think allowed, my brother's the coach in Indiana. And, why do we coach basketball? Because of those two things.
Hey, Sean, if I could ask, because the passion really jumps out, when I watch you coach and when I watch Archie on the sideline. So I have to ask, because I would imagine you guys had some knockdown, drag out games in your driveway or on the blacktop. It must have been intense.
It's funny you mentioned that, Steve. Arch and I are 10 years different in age. So
wow, I didn't know that.
When I'm 18, you leave in San Diego to go to Arizona, Arch is second or third grade.
Yeah.
So in a way, I was kind of somebody who could kind of motivate him as well. He probably learned the game watching me and then obviously playing for my dad. But, my dad's one of those guys. I know as we get older, the legend seems to always grow sometimes, what you talk about. But, Steve, he just wasn't messing around. You know what I mean? Like basketball, it was passionate, but, I'll never forget, we played a high school game against a rival and the clock was winding down. And I was dribbling the clock out. We were going to win the game. And I put the one finger up, like number one, and dribbled 4 times. Man, I tell you what, you would have thought that I didn't even get a ride home. Like, I can't believe you would show everyone up like that. It's just, again, it was a different time, but you think about how players celebrate a made field goal today and like when we grew up. And then Coach Olson was a little bit like that too, man. It's like, respect the game, straight-laced. It was just a different day and age and a time.
Stevie, it reminds me of the hardscrabble streets that you and I grew up in Northern California and on the beaches in Southern California, where we grew up.
A little different atmosphere.
A little different. But I want to ask you, because you and I have kind of joked about this. I think our upbringing may be slightly different, but maybe a little bit the same in the sense that our parents were highly involved, for our careers. And you and I talk about, we're pretty nice guys. a lot of the times, but we have the ability to snap every once in a while. What, you were a ball boy with the Bruins, with UCLA back in the day. Your dad was a professor there. Take me back to that. What was that like? Was that when you started to love the game? Is that when the passion for you really came out?
Yeah, I mean, my first basketball memory was walking into Pauley Pavilion. I believe it would have been 1972, and UCLA had Bill Walton. They were number 1 in the country, and they played Maryland, who was number 2 in the country, and Lefty Drizel's coaching. And Lefty at the time had announced, we're going to become the UCLA of the East. And they were loaded. They had John Lucas and Len Elmore. Had another guy, I think, who went on to the NBA.
Brad Davis.
So what was his name?
Brad
Davis.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you can imagine, 6 years old, right? I already, I love running around and shooting a ball in my driveway or whatever, but walking into Pauley Pavilion with every seat filled, the band playing, UCLA's won, 6 straight NCAA championships at that point. The number 2 team in the country is on the other side of the court. It was magic. And that's when I fell in love with the game. And I'll never forget, UCLA won by 1 point, and my dad and I walked out of Pauley, and the group next to us was talking, and they were complaining. I said, man, UCLA, we looked horrible. What was wrong with us tonight? Walton was doing that. They were complaining about everything. And finally, I turned to my dad. I said, Dad, we won. He's like, son, you don't understand the expectations that exist around here. But that was my first real taste of big time basketball. And I was hooked forever.
Steve, when you said yesterday when you were on our athletic department Zoom call, it's been 30 some years since you were here, right? 30 some years. And I look at that one season 3-point percentage that you shot. I think it would have been your last year at Arizona as a player, 3-point percentage, right? I mean, that's a record that has lasted 30 some years, and I don't ever see it broken. If you really look at those numbers in a hard way, it's almost incredible to play in the Pac-10 conference back then and shoot the percentage from 3 you did. And then looking at the percentage you then shot in the NBA, how did you become that deadly of a shooter? And I'm sure you feel this way. There's guys who, they walk around like they're good shooters, but there's a difference, and the difference comes from good to great. How did you become such a great shooter in games, not just drills? Some guys make them when you're working out, but right. that percentage doesn't translate. And that's a lot of basketball. That's to get to be that great of a shooter.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. That was kind of the one thing that I felt sort of like I was born with, when I was a little kid. I could shoot. It was just hand-eye or whatever it was. And then I was lucky to have really good coaching growing up. And so I remember in junior high, I had coaches from our high school who would coach the younger guys. And the guy who worked with me on shooting is a guy named Chip England, who is now an assistant coach with the Spurs and one of the great shooting coaches in the NBA.
Well, I didn't realize.
Was blessed. Yeah. So he was 4 years ahead of me at Palisades High School. And we had a system in place, which was really cool, where all the high school kids who played for Palisades would coach the junior high kids. And then when you got to high school, then you'd coach the next group. And so Chip helped me quite a bit, and I had good coaching in high school as well. And I worked at it, but I think that season you mentioned was really magical, Sean. I mean, we just had such a great team. We shot, Matt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we shot 55% as a team that year in 87, 88. Mm-hmm. So we were moving the ball so well that it felt like we were getting wide open shots the whole season. And it was just a kind of a dream year for us.
Yeah.
Hey, Sean, you mentioned Steve, obviously. I think he shot I want to say he shot 57% from three
Yeah.
that year.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
It's like beyond belief. Like
Right.
Salim Stoudemire, I think, is the second best shooter ever at U of A history, and I think he shot like 48%, and he was tremendous.
Yeah.
But that's way behind 57.
No doubt.
But if we lined all three of us up, at least in our college statistics, nobody out of the three of us shot better free throws. So I'm going to throw that back to you. How did you become such a good free throw shooter? And I want to say, before you answer that, I want to say you were 88.5% from the line. How did you do that?
You know, I go back to my dad to kind of, this will tell you a little bit about him. He was our PE teacher. He was the gym teacher in our high school. And from 9th grade all the way to my senior year of high school, I never attended a PE class. I would stand in line with the other students. And this wasn't just exclusive to me. If you were on the basketball team, this was kind of what you did. You know, they would go play kickball and you had somebody rebounding for you and you had to chart 100 free throws. And he would keep a running tally like on the window of his office in the locker room, you know, where a phys ed teacher would have an office, and he would just have it out there, you know. So it became kind of a sense of pride, like who's the best free throw shooter in school? Who's the best free throw shooter in your class? Who made the most this week? Who, you know, and we did it religiously, like, you know, before school would end in May, we were doing it. We carried it into the summer. So I'm going to just say that repetition, and making it an important part of the game. And it's just, every team, you look at these close games, it's amazing how sometimes you forget to talk about it, but the narrative was that you made 6 in a row and you won by 1 point, or, you know, you had that one stretch in the game where you went cold from the free throw line, and at the end of the day, it cost you a 1-point game. So free throw shooting is obviously important, but that's how it happened for us.
Yeah. I want to go back to, we were talking about Lute a minute ago. And I remember we had a kind of an Arizona alumni party the year you were hired as the coach.
Yeah.
And I think pretty much everybody was there. And I remember you and the coaches, I think, asked every player that was there, the ex-players, what made Lute such a great coach.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I've never asked you, what was the theme from all of that, from asking all the players? What was the theme? What did you get in terms of all the responses?
No, I'm glad you asked me that, Matt, because, you know, now it's been 11 years later, and, you know, guys like yourself, it's just sometimes, you know, a simple conversation leads to something that, you know, coach did with you guys or as part of the program. But, you know, I'd say like the 3 things that really stood out for me is he made Tucson and the community totally connected to the basketball program, where it was like we were all one. It became a love affair. It was a cool thing to go to McHale Center and watch the Wildcats, you know. And that may sound like an easy thing, but there's a lot of coaches that have tried it, and I think it's part coaches' greatness, but part, you know, the amazing community that we have and still have to this day. I mean, Steve, we've led the Pac-12 and Pac-10 in attendance now for 36 consecutive years. I would say that streak would have started right around the time when you came to Arizona, if you think about, you know, the timing of that. But I think that's one thing he did, and obviously you guys know with all of the different things, the way he ran a banquet, the Fiesta Bowl tournament, you know, just the different things, his presence and his family's presence in the community. I think number 2 is he's always been a great recruiter. You know, I mean, Steve, it's like big difference when you got great players, old players, experienced player, right? I mean, it's just, you can do the same thing, same practice plan, same motivation. Sometimes you feel like you're doing a great job, your best ever as a coach, but you still are at the mercy of those horses that are out there playing and the talent and experience. And, you know, sometimes I pick up a team picture and it'll never look like that again because players today leave much sooner. But I mean, you can count 10 pros on one team, 11. And I'm not talking about just a cup of coffee guys, you know, guys that have played through decades in the NBA and they're on the same team, you know. But his ability to recruit, and you guys know this, Steve, you're a product of it, and so are you, Matt. He always wasn't about recruiting that McDonald's All-American, or it wasn't that he was recruiting a top 10 list. I think he became a great evaluator of talent and staff, like so many hidden gems, guys like yourself, he didn't just recruit that. And I think that's something that we always try to dial back to. And then the last part is, just as a coach, to me, it seems like he's just incredibly well-rounded. It's hard to really say he was better on offense than defense, or like he didn't emphasize rebounding. Like, his teams seem to be so balanced and fundamental. And I think, Steve, it goes to like the way he organized his practice plans and the emphasis on fundamental and team play. But, you combine those three things that I just said, that's really Arizona basketball at its finest. Just this crazy community in McHale Center, passion for the game and fundamentals and great talent, and it's amazing the run that he had. It really is.
So I got to school in 83, 84, and the program was really down. And so there weren't a lot of fans coming in at the time. But I remember Coach Olson telling us, one of the reasons he took the job was because 4 or 5 years prior to that, Fred Snowden was the coach, and he had the place rolling. And McHale Center was jam-packed. Guys like Joe Nels and Russell Brown Bob Elliott were playing, and McHale was packed. And so Coach Olson told us, he said, look, this is a basketball town, and if we put a good product on the floor, people are going to show up. And so I remember that first year, we were getting maybe 5,000, 6,000 fans a game in the early part of the season. And back then they would give us the tickets. You probably remember from playing at Pitt, they actually gave you the tickets, but it was before they figured out they had to, work it a different way. And so I remember going into the 7-Eleven across the street from our dorm, Babcock dorm, Matt, and my 4 tickets early in my freshman year. And I literally said, hey, does anybody want to go to the game? And I couldn't give them away. And by the end of that first season, we were getting 8,000, 9,000. And then I believe the streak that you just mentioned, Sean, 36 years in a row, I believe it started the next season, because we started selling out in Coach's second season. And it's amazing. It's the community has supported the team ever since, and through every up and down, there's just this love affair with the fans and the team, and it's something I always cherish.
Yeah, I don't think Steve, you and I talk about this. I bet the current players have no idea, how much you and I talk about the team now, and Judd Bushler, and how we share notes. And I'm sure on the road, or with your teams, you had Henri Iguodala on your team. I was wondering or curious about, what's it like in the NBA when every stop you're seeing a U of A guy, and, Sean Elliott's doing the TV for the Spurs, and then you've got, coaches everywhere. Lute Olson's son is a coach at Houston. Right. And, Bruce Frazier coaches with you. What is that like? What are some of the stories that you encounter on the road and in the NBA?
There's just a bond that's automatic, even when I'm separated by 30 years from a player. Every time we play the Bulls now, Lauri Markkanen comes over and we shake hands and we talk for a couple minutes, and it's after an exchange of pleasantries, it's hey, did you see our game the other night? You see us beat Oregon the other night, or and we talk about the current team, and it's just great. There's a bond there that exists, and you can imagine over the 32 years since I've left, there have been so many players in the league from Arizona and coaches, and so it really is a fraternity, a brotherhood, and it's we sort of look out for each other.
Sean, I was gonna ask you, kind of in that vein. I've always told people that have been around you for the last 10 or 11 years that you could probably be a marketing, like a chief marketing officer at a Fortune 500 company. You come up with these incredible, marketing and ways to brand the program, which it can brand itself, but you've done such a great job. And I think the one thing that always comes to mind is the A Players program, past, present, and future. And Steve just talked a lot about that. Go back, and I'm wondering, when you first got to Arizona, you understood the brand. How did that all come about, and how has that become just such a huge thing and part of the program?
Well, you know, looking back on it, I got really lucky to think in these terms, but I think April 6, 2009 would have been the day that I was hired here. And Steve actually was in McHale. I'll never forget it. And just seeing him, it kind of reassured me, because at that time, you know, the popular thing wasn't to be the new coach at Arizona. You know, following Coach Olson, that's a big task. And it's one that oftentimes fails just because in your best attempt, there'll never be another Lute Olson. You know, part of how I tried to look at it is, you know, there's kind of an awkward transition period. So it wasn't like Coach just walked off the court and then I came in. I think, you know, to Steve's point, the community and people that love the U of A, you know, they saw, there's no guarantee here, right? It can get off track. Let's hope we can maintain what we've done, or come close to maintaining the program we've had for decades. So I kind of looked at it almost from what Steve mentioned, and that is, if somebody like Coach Olson could stay at the U of A for so long and have that much success, there has to be a few things that are to his advantage as the coach here. And, you know, one that's clearly shines through is what we talked about, and that is the amazing competitive advantage of McHale Center in the community. And even when we're on the road in the Pac-12, you hear that U of A chant, you know, it's like, and so for me, the number one thing that I wanted to do, because I didn't play at Arizona, and you looked at so many great teams and players and coaches, is to have a way of just saying, look, just because you're not playing for me, or you played in the Pac-10, not the Pac-12, that doesn't mean you can't love the U of A the same way you would have loved it when you were here. And, you know, we just came up with, you know, a players program. And if you think about it, it really says it all. Like, if you recruit the right way and get, you know, tremendous people and players, if you treat the players that you have the right way on and off the court, work hard to develop them, and you make people like you guys, alums, proud and a feeling that this program is still yours, you know, those three forces are really powerful when you consider who these people are. I'm glad we did it then, because shortly after is when social media took hold, and, you know, we already had that up and running pre-social media. So, yeah. But, you know, I oftentimes come back to it. And, you know, Steve, I'd say one of the hardest challenges for me, and I would say for every college coach, is when you recruit today, and a lot of our talented players are only here for a year, sometimes two, in your best attempt to allow them to appreciate and respect and love the tradition and really know what a special place they have here. They do understand it, but not to the level of you two guys, you know, because they just, if you think about if your career ended in 12 months or 9 months or 24 months, all the things that you never got to, you never would have experienced that. Like a Final Four, for example, what would it be like to not even make the Final Four? Well, you didn't get there. So, you know, I think sometimes I worry, as we have more people in the NBA, you know, they love the U of A, no doubt about it, but that appreciation is something we try to really stoke, you know, with them, because when you're only at a place for 9 months, sometimes 2 years, in your best attempt to like teach them, make sure they understand how great of a place we have, you know, they're clearly gone a lot sooner than we would have been in college, you know. So talk about building culture. I almost feel like you got to do it every year now. You know, some of the things that I think were on autopilot when you two played here, you can't take it for granted. You can have it, and then 6 months later, it's like, hey, you have 8 new players, you know, and none of these guys were here a year ago. So it's probably more like what you deal with in free agency, Steve, and, you know, players retiring and rookies coming in.
Yeah, but I think you guys have it much tougher, really, because, you know, we're able to keep our core group of guys if we, you know, choose to re-sign them and we come to an agreement. I mean, I'm about to coach Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green next year for the 7th consecutive year.
Yeah.
And so you talk about that culture and being able to sustain it. Well, it's sustained through your best players. And I think back to, you know, 30 years ago, college sports were just in a much healthier place, college basketball in particular. Watching the Jordan documentary, they showed the highlights from the national championship game, Georgetown, North Carolina, and I'm looking at the talent on the floor. It's like, oh my God, it's James Worthy, Sam Perkins,
Yeah.
Patrick Ewing, Jordan, and all these guys stayed for multiple years. Ewing stayed all 4 at Georgetown, as you well know. I mean, it's such a different vibe now, and you think back then as a fan of college basketball, how much more invested you were because you would watch guys grow and you would see them from their freshman year to sophomore, junior, maybe even all the way through their senior year. A guy like Sean Elliott, who stayed 4 years. I mean, it's, as a fan, I think it's tough to not get to know a group for more than 6 months, and then it just all turns over, and you're cheering for the next group the following year. It's a much different deal now.